Nothing compares to you, Free Skate Friday. Welcome into the DNVR Avalanche podcast. Another Friday episode. We had to get a little Sinead O'Connor in there with the haircuts we're rocking on this podcast, so it had to be done. On today's episode, we will be talking mostly about some of the worst trades in both Avalanche and NHL history. Gonna do some dunking, I guess. We'll put it that way. But before we get to all that, the news of the day being the Colorado Eagles dropped their new jerseys, I suppose. One of them looks good. One of them everyone else will think looks good and I don't like. So that's perfectly fair. I think we have the images. I'm not sure. We can bring them up. So here's their like standard jersey. It's cool. It's their classic logo. They have the Avs blue now. Neat.
I like it.
Yeah.
It's not complicated.
Yep.
You know, there's not a lot going on there, but I really like the shoulders and I really like the stripes on the elbow.
Really? The stripes are weird, kind of, to me. The shoulders I'm for, but I don't know if I'm a huge fan of the stripes. But I actually, is that gray? I thought it was white when I first saw it. But if that like inner color is gray, I think I actually like that a little bit better.
I think they look good, man.
Yeah.
I think they're clean.
I mean, no complaints. It's not ugly or anything, unlike these next ones, as Victor alludes to here. Their second jersey, it's just that they stole the blueberry. Like,
yeah,
it's all they did. 100% stole it. Neat.
I like it. I think it's neat.
I've never liked the blueberry. The black shoulder pads are fine, but it's too blue. I've never liked
It's a lot of blue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the socks as well. It's kind of out of control, but
yeah. Z pointed out to me they look like the Jets jerseys. Yeah, exactly.
Is it the same color of blue? Like,
it's pretty similar. I think it's darker, but it's pretty similar.
Yeah. Not great. And I've never been a fan of the
horizontal lettering is not my favorite either.
Yeah. But you can purchase these now if you're a fan. Go get your Martin Gout jersey and say you were one of the cool kids.
I mean, the Eagles have their own identity.
Yeah, right. I think they still do. Like, this is their third jersey. They're still going to have their main logo jersey as their main one. And they've kept their colors in the logo and everything. So, the leaks on the new jerseys, we'll see. Guy and I were talking before the show. We're not very hyped on them. We'll put it that way. So hang loose on some of the retro reverse, whatever the hell they're calling them these days.
Reverse retro jerseys?
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Yeah. They reversed the modern colors onto retro logos. I don't really understand.
They were like, retro is super cool, but we're going to get ahead of the curve and we're going to be reverse retro.
All right.
Okay.
So
I can make stuff up too.
So let's move into some of the worst trades. Should we start with
a natural segue?
It is naturally terrible jerseys into terrible trades. Okay, that's how it works. Should we start with Avs or should we start with league wide?
Let's start with league wide.
Okay,
we'll save our misery for later.
All right, we can be sad later. We can make fun of teams for starters. Let's just start off with the obvious here, AJ.
The Gretzky trade?
Is the Gretzky trade the worst trade in NHL history?
I think it has to be, right? Even though
probably.
Didn't the Oilers win the cup the next year?
They did, yes.
So it was like
But Gretzky went on to have like 5 more 100-point seasons or something. Like,
yeah, I mean, he's still Gretzky after that. You know, he was still he took the Kings to the Cup Finals, and then that was kind of it. He never got back.
yep.
But that's still the game's greatest player ever.
True.
For nothing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's essentially nothing.
It was a bunch of stuff. It was a bunch of money.
It's mostly $15 million. Yeah.
Like, so. Great. That guy paid his bills.
True. I mean, I'm trying to find one that could hold up to it, but there's just no player going the other way that ever comes close. I mean, honestly,
like the Waugh deal.
Yeah, the closest in talent I can think of is the Waugh deal from the Canadian side. Just a disaster of a trade.
I hate to do this while I'm in this room, but the Solani deal is a total disaster.
Yeah, that one's on there for me too, definitely.
You know, like Oleg Tverdovsky was fine, but
that other dude,
Chad Kilger, Oleg Tverdovsky, and a 3rd round pick for
a Hall of Famer. Yeah. Didn't work out super well for Winnipeg.
Yeah.
So
the other one is the Alexei Yashin deal.
Yeah. Well,
to the Islanders.
That one's a little bit different because Yashin was at least like serviceable for a couple seasons.
Yeah, but you gave up Zdeno Chara and what eventually became the Jason Spezza pick.
Like 100%. Not a good trade for the Isles at all. Who, by the way, they're actually still paying Yashin this year. This is the last year that they pay his buyout. So,
and then they're only like halfway through the DiPietro contract.
Yeah, that one goes till like 2030 or something ridiculous. Like,
yeah.
Ooh, okay. Jimmy Carson. You still traded the greatest player ever, though.
Yeah. Really just goes to show you what 100-point seasons were back then.
Yeah, kind of nothing. MVPs were putting up like 150-point seasons on the reg. So
I mean, more than that because Gretzky and Lemieux were throwing up 180s.
Yeah. Gretzky had
you're just like
a 214-point season or whatever it was. Like,
yeah,
just stupidity at that point. Let's see what else is on this list. Oh yeah, the Naslund trade from Pittsburgh to Vancouver was terrible for Pittsburgh. And like Naslund is one of those players where people are a little bit split on him because he was very, very good and never quite ascended to like godhood level. But considering what Pittsburgh got back for him, which is some guy named Alex Stoyanov, who is someone I had never heard of before, for a dude who, went on to be a captain of a Vancouver team and regularly put up 70 to 100 points.
When was that deal?
95, 96.
That hurts.
Yeah. That was when Pittsburgh was bad or about to get bad, I suppose. They were still kind of hanging on to the glory years at that point.
Yeah, that was right around the time that Yager left and went to Washington.
Yep. And then it was all downhill until the Crosby times, basically.
I don't think that was actually that bad of a deal.
The Luongo deal?
Yeah, the Luongo deal. Brian Allen played a ton of games. Todd Bertuzzi was, I think Bertuzzi was still serviceable for them. I don't think he was great or anything, but
yeah.
Did they? I can't remember the timeline of. Was that after?
Yeah, that was in 06. So that
It was okay, so it was right after the
Yeah.
lockout.
Yeah.
Oh, and then they traded him immediately to Detroit.
Right.
So yeah, he was still a decent player. He just didn't do it in Florida.
Yep. And the whole Luongo going back and forth from Florida to Vancouver is a whole saga of its own. So
yeah. Well, and the first deal where he when he was traded from the Islanders, like the Islanders, like Mike Milbury's teams of players that he traded was better than the teams he actually built.
Well, we can actually bring him up. Let's see, because Milbury has to be one of the worst, right? Like,
yeah, he was awful.
Let's see. Let's just go through a little bit of Mike Milbury's trade history here. Was part of the Wendell Clark for Claude Lemieux deal. As he got Wendell Clark for Steve Thomas ultimately in the three-way part of that trade.
Yeah.
Let's see. What I'm looking for some big names. He did this dude made so many trades. It's insane.
Yeah.
He made a trade like every 2 weeks.
Like Olli Jokinen and Roberto Luongo for Mark Parrish and Oleg Kvasha is a disaster.
Not good. Not good.
Like Kvasha and Parrish were like good players.
He gave up Kasparaitis for Brian Smolinski.
I would have no idea how to value that.
Me either. I have nothing. I don't know anything about Brian Smolinski.
He had a long career.
He did. He looks like a significantly better player than Kasparaitis, actually. So maybe Milbury did something good.
Yeah, the Cam Neely.
Yeah, that one was really bad. Really bad. Oh, there's a
I don't feel too badly about the Sundin deal.
Yeah,
they were in kind of a they didn't make hay with it, given that he was a Hall of Fame player. But they were in such a weird spot where it was like, do you move a guy to wing? Like, what do you do?
Milbury traded Bertuzzi and McCabe to the Vancouver in '98 for Trevor Linden, who would then leave them after 2 seasons to go play for Montreal. Yeah,
Kasparaitis was really good at what he did.
Yeah.
He was a dirty player, but he was a really, really good defender.
Take what you can get, I suppose.
Can open the door for the Radko Gudises of the world.
Before we go any further, we do need to take our first period break here and acknowledge Breckenridge Brewery, the official beer of DNVR. Nothing makes you want to drink quite like Mike Milbury, in my opinion. So
it's true.
Crack open a beer and have a Breck brew. And while you're at it, be sure to look into our new code if you're looking to re-sign up with the DNVR.com or sign up for the first time. Now is an excellent time to get an annual subscription with code AVS when you sign up to help support this podcast right here, doing a little contest where we want to beat all of the other beats, show them our podcast is dope. Basically, when you sign up for that annual subscription with code AVS, you'll get a free DNVR shirt, a free DNVR mask, and a free DNVR sticker pack. So be sure to jump in right now. It's a great deal. You're basically covering like half your subscription cost for free by picking up all of that stuff along the way. So might as well do it. Again, code AVS if you want to support AJ, Evan, and I. There it is. Look at that. We even got the thing set up on the bottom. Good job. Props to the production squad. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast presented by DraftKings Sportsbook with Rudo and AJ talking terrible trades. Now, I struggle with this because trades are hard to value. You can look at Boston trading out Joe Thornton and say, that's a really bad value trade. But Boston still went on to win cups after that. So
Was Brad Stewart part of their?
Was he still with them when they won the cup? I don't actually know.
Yeah, and that's why I'm like, they did it despite that. Boston continues to succeed today, despite the fact that they blew 3 first-round picks in a row.
Yeah.
In 2015, in what's going to turn out to be an all-time great draft.
Yep.
Boston didn't get nothing for Seguin. They got 2 good years of Louis Eriksson, and then he left in free agency.
Yep. But that's what I'm saying. Like, how do you value a trade where it was not a good trade overall? Like, in the long run, Boston would have gotten a lot more value out of Seguin, but they traded Seguin and won a cup. Like, does the cup just default make bad trades worth it anyway? It doesn't matter.
I don't think so. I mean, why? What was the rush to get rid of Joe Thornton in the first place?
Yeah.
There's video of them trading Tyler Seguin, and the whole thing is impossibly stupid. Like, the fact that they survived despite getting away with some of these things is a testament to, I don't know, getting lucky, I guess. I mean,
yeah,
Patrice Bergeron and Brad Marchand are second-round picks that turned into who they've turned into. Like David Pastrnak was a 26th overall, 25th
late first, yeah,
overall. Like, the guy, I wrote the history of that pick, and it was like Pastrnak and a bunch of nobodies. Like they got lucky. They
doing
got a little bit
right,
lucky.
But it's not trading.
Well, some of it is. They also they got Tuukka Rask out of Toronto because Toronto sucks. They were on the other end of one of the all-time great fleeces. So, that's how you survive stuff like that. But it's like the what could have been in Boston is almost as good as the what could have been for the Islanders.
Yeah.
It's hard to survive some of that stuff, but it helps when you have Hall of Fame caliber players still sitting around. But when you trade them away and you get nothing for them, at least when the Nordiques got rid of Sundin, it was like, okay, well, and then they immediately moved him. He was like their third line center. But when the Nordiques got rid of Sundin, and then it turned into Claude Lemieux for the Avs. Like, not a Hall of Fame player, but pretty close.
Turned out okay in the end.
I mean, there are a lot of reasons that bad trades turn into bad trades. When the Duchesne deal happened, did any of us think that Kyle Turris was going to completely fall apart the way that he did? Like, that wasn't in the cards, and we didn't. That wasn't something. Of course, we didn't focus on the Nashville aspect of that trade, but nobody thought Kyle Turris was going to fall apart. And you don't know that that's going to happen until the guy gets there, and it just doesn't work for whatever reason.
Yeah. With any trade, there's always an element of risk, right? That something is going to happen where, he just doesn't fit in your system, or you're trading away a piece. We've talked about it 100 times on this podcast with Tyson Jost. If they do end up moving him, there's always a chance that he becomes a 40, 50-point player on some other team.
Right. Like, you have to feel like if the Avs trading Tyson Jost today sets them up, it's the exact kind of situation that puts them in a position to lose a trade.
Yep.
Because the Avs would be, at this point, they would have to be a package of something, or if they trade him on their own, it would have to be like mediocre futures. Like, you're replacing a second round pick. If you can even get that for him.
Yeah.
And if that's what they get for him, that I can see why the Avs are like, screw this, we're just going to hang on to him. We're just going to pay him $900,000.
Deal with it. Let's talk about a
But-
few more recent trades here. I did want to get into some more current. I guess the Sagan one isn't that far away, but when you look at current trades, what are some that stand out over maybe, I don't know, the past 5 or 10 years? O'Reilly going to St. Louis for a bag of stuff, basically.
Yeah, you look at it's crazy because O'Reilly's value leaving Buffalo should have been higher than it was when they traded for him.
Right.
He was signed already. He was coming off of his most productive seasons. Like he had been a top-ish center, there with Eichel.
Yep.
Like his value should have been through the roof. I don't care if he came out and said he doesn't like, or he'd lost the love of the game
for
or
hockey
his will
or
to live or whatever the hell that quote was.
Yep.
Like whatever. His value should have been crazy. And they got him for Tage Thompson, who I could have told you on draft day was a bust.
Was a big yikes.
Yeah. He couldn't do anything at UConn except set up for one-timers. And he's got a great one-timer, but it turns out the NHL game requires you to be a lot more than just that. And then, cap dumps in guys like Sabotka.
Yep.
Like it was an awful deal.
Yeah,
you compare that to
agree.
even the first O'Reilly. What did they give up? Like they gave up Comfer and Zadorov, who would have been helpful. And then who knows? Who knows who they take if they keep that, because they had the first pick in the second round that they traded to Colorado. Colorado traded down, but and ended up getting nothing out of all the picks that they got for that. But
50 games out of AJ, not even 50 games out of AJ
20
Greer.
games out of AJ Greer and nothing out of Cam Morrison. But still, like in terms of a trade down, it was a good one. You would do that again. You would take that chance again. But like for Buffalo, you have no idea who they take.
But
and the pick ended up Jeremy Waugh.
Yeah.
Like it's mostly just bad luck that guy's knee just fell apart.
It's just crazy that the Avs have, or had, I suppose they traded Zadorov, but there's 2 NHL regulars on that side of the deal, and then Buffalo flips O'Reilly for Berglund's out of the league. Sabaka's basically out of the league. Thompson cannot get a regular job there. We'll see with their first round pick, which ended up being Ryan Johnson, but
at this point, that's the only intriguing part of that deal. It's Ryan Johnson.
Yep.
And I was a big Ryan Johnson fan, at best as a middle pairing defender.
Yep.
So that stands out as a bad deal. Obviously, everybody's involvement other than Colorado's in the original Duchesne deal isn't good.
Borderline disastrous for Ottawa. Like
Nashville too. Nashville gives up Gerard, Kamenev, and a second round pick, and got nothing close to what they thought they were getting out of. There wasn't a big gap between Duchesne and Turris at the time of the deal.
Yeah, right. That exactly is Duchesne was marginally better, and Ottawa was willing to give up Turris for him because they thought it was the piece that would make them. And we all know the story now. And
Turris was going to leave at the end of that year because Duchesne they set it up so that they had 2 years with Duchesne and Turris was his contract expired a year earlier, and so
they
it was
ended up moving Duchesne later anyway. But
right. For also not a great package from Columbus, but those deadline deals, sometimes that happens. Like you look at what the Islanders got at the deadline for Vanek when they traded him to Montreal, and it was like nothing.
All I'm saying is, in the modern game, there's a reason why no one picks up Joe Sakic's phone calls. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, how bad was the Taylor Hall deal for Edmonton? because it's a weird situation, right, where they needed a defenseman.
And like they got one, and they got a good one. It's just that they didn't have the high end guy that they needed behind or in front of him.
Yeah.
To really make him, because Adam Larson is a perfectly serviceable, like solid middle pairing. He's still there. He'll probably be there. I think his contract expires after this next season, and then he goes into free agency, and who knows. But the value is obviously off. That it was 1-for-1. They gave up.
And Taylor Hall goes and wins an MVP with New Jersey.
Right. Like they gave up an elite wing in his prime for middle pairing defenseman also in his prime.
Yeah.
It's not great value, but it's just not a disaster. It's not the like, oh my God, fiasco that some of these other deals we've talked about are. Like the Joe Thornton deal, that's a fiasco.
Yeah.
I don't care what kind of career Brad Stewart had. That's a
at the time
that's arguably a top 5 player of an entire generation that they gave up for Brad Stewart.
Yeah. Is there such a thing as a bad trade for both teams?
Yeah. Look at the I look at every deadline ever.
True.
I think that the Colorado Arizona deadline deal, where they sent the Bleakley, Wood, and Tanguay for Bodker.
And Arizona, like Tanguay is a good player, but it just didn't matter at all in Arizona.
It was the end. Yeah. It was the end of his career.
Yeah.
Bleakley they got, and they obviously were not going to sign him so that they could get the second round pick. They got one great year out of Kyle Wood, which had a lot of "I told you so"s going around until he very predictably never came close to coming back. Bodker, I guess Bodker was good for the Avs. He was one of their leading scorers. It was just sort of a blah deal. So I guess maybe that's not a great example.
Do anything with it.
Yeah, I would have to trades that were bad for both teams. There are a lot of trades that become nothing for both teams.
Yeah, but not actively bad. Yeah.
Yeah, where you're just like, okay. I'm actually struggling to come up with one.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. I have no doubt they're out there. The trade that inspired this for me was PK Subban for Shea Weber, which, Shea Weber is still a very good player after that trade. Just the reason I thought of it is there was a hot minute after that trade where Weber was injured all the time.
Yeah.
And it felt like neither team was really getting value out of it.
Like, that one's weird because the Weber injuries complicate things, because when he's been healthy, he's still been outstanding.
Yeah.
Subban obviously is falling off a cliff now, but there were a couple of years there, those first couple of years in Nashville. He was pretty freaking good, man. And it kind of that just sort of felt like a blah. Well, yeah, that's a bad trade. Like,
we'll get to that in the third period. Yeah.
That's a Theodore for Abisher is, I have no issues with that, because Jose Theodore won a playoff round for the Avs.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't always pretty.
There's a worse goalie that the Avs traded for. I'll put it that way.
Whoa, boy.
Yeah.
You know what? If it wasn't a second round pick,
right?
Like, we'll get there. We'll get there. But if it wasn't, that was the real problem.
It was. But yeah, I guess kind of to put a bow on this segment, it's that if you're getting even value on a trade, it doesn't mean that it's going to end up in even value at the end of it. With someone like PK in Nashville, who had a couple good years, and then look, we all know the real story is they traded out PK to make room for Matt Duchene, but on paper, they traded PK Subban for virtually nothing on the other side of that deal.
Yeah.
So when you have years after the fact and the hindsight to look back on things, a lot of trades look a lot different than they did in the moment.
Yeah. And there are a lot of reasons for deals, like the Subban to New Jersey deal.
Yeah.
That's entirely about we need to get rid of this salary cap so we can go sign Matt Duchene.
Yep.
Which, how funny is it that, like, the Predators give PK Subban away for free so that they could free up the cap space to go sign Matt Duchene? And everybody just sort of shrugged.
Yep.
We were like, good piece of business for New Jersey. And then it ended up not being because he was a mess in his first year.
Struggled massively.
Yeah, and it's like, could you, if New Jersey tried to trade him right now, could they even recoup the second round picks?
I doubt it. I seriously doubt it.
It's the funny part of trades, man, is that you just don't ever really know.
Yep. So, on that note, we do need to take our second period break. Tell you guys about Strava Craft Coffee if these trades are getting your blood boiling a little bit and you need to chill out but still stay focused. Strava Craft Coffee is the thing for you. We have that down at the bar as well. Cold brewed if you like that style. Or, of course, you can always order online from StravaCraftCoffee.com and use code DNVR to get 20% off every single time you buy, except for do it right now, because this week you get 30% off with that code. Special this week only. Be sure to jump in on that. Now is the time to get that extra discount. It will not last. It'll go back down to that normal 20% very soon. So if you have not gave it a shot, now's a great time to do it. And our gaming sponsor as well, WGT Golf. We have a tournament going on live right now. If you're not joined in, go download from DNVRgolf.com, search for DNVR3 to join our clubhouse so you can get into the tournament and play the tournament. Once you finish up, be sure to take a screenshot of your final score and send it in either to the pinned tweet on the DNVR Sports Twitter account or send it to info@thednvr.com via email, and you'll be entered to win your choice of a free shirt or mask if you get your name drawn. Don't have to do well in the tournament. Even if you're last place, all you have to do is send in that screenshot and you have a chance to win. So jump on it. It ends this weekend. So get on it either today, tomorrow, or sneak it in late on Sunday to have your chance to win. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. I see Guy has some tweet lined up in the background. I have no idea what it says. I'm going to assume it's something cool. Going to make him show it for us, or we can just start to. All right, yeah, here we go.
It's just Sakic related.
Ah, perfect. This is exactly what teams will do now, but not what teams used to do back when Joe Sakic still had Patrick Waugh around.
Yeah, and it's some of these deals, when we go back and look at them, they're so yikes.
It is pretty gnarly. Let's start off with, is Bourbata for Battaglia the worst on your list, AJ? The worst Avs trade, to be clear.
I think it's got to be right up there. The only saving grace in it is that they turned Battaglia into Connor Walchuk.
Right. They ended up flipping the piece they got for something decent, but
yeah, they had a number of. I think Verbata Battaglia is worse than a bunch of their like prospect deals that they did.
Yeah.
And like draft pick stuff like Tom Gilbert for Tommy Salo and giving up Mark Parrish back in the day.
Boychuk,
a lot of those
too, yeah.
Yeah, like a lot of those are those are mid-round prospects that became NHL players. Like, okay, whatever. But the Battaglia, the Verbata for Battaglia is bad because Verbata was good in the NHL.
Yep. And continued to be well after that trade.
Granted, at the time, I don't think any of us were like, this guy's definitely going to play 1,100 games in the NHL.
Right.
It was like, hey, this is a good young player. This is the kind of guy that Lacroix is always trying to trade for. And gave him up straight up for Bates Battaglia, who was coming off of an absolutely atrocious season in Carolina. You know, he had that 20-goal year and then completely fell apart the next year. And that's when Pierre Lacroix was like, gotta have him. What are you doing? And that was the frustration, was that he gave up a really good player and didn't get one in return.
Better or worse than a second-round pick for Brad Stewart? And look, here's the thing about this trade. I understand the actual really bad part of this was extending him before he played a single game for the team and not the trade itself.
The trade itself was...
It was bad, but the extension is what
Not
made
great.
it a freaking disaster. Like,
definitely. And you remember they signed like Brad Stewart and Cody McLeod like on the same day.
Yeah.
To those extensions in the preseason where it was like, what are you guys doing? I think the Verbata deal is worse because you gave up a player. You gave up a guy in the NHL.
That's true.
Like, a second round pick is valuable, but it's just for like a proven, there's a caliber of player where it's totally worth it. You know, the Drury deal, I think, is the runaway number one worst trade in franchise in Avalanche history.
Yeah, I can't argue against that. I even struggled to just talk about it because I get so upset about it. It's the original John Tavares got it. As he just sits there. The Avs gave up two legitimate NHLers too, Chris Drury and Stefan Yell.
Yeah. In
this deal.
Well, and like I always defend it by saying, look, Derek Morris was a good player. He had a good career. He was really productive. He just wasn't what Lacroix thought he was.
Yep.
And then he continued to downgrade it. He turned Chris Drury into Chris Gratton.
Yep.
And Aussie Vannanen.
Yep.
The end of when Lacroix missed, boy did he miss.
Yeah, he took big swings rough, and he either hit home runs or just totally bombed out.
I would, in talking about the Brad Stewart deal, I would say the Red O'Bara deal is worse.
Well, they're in late. Well, okay, in 2014, there were 3 trades in a row that were just terrible. The Red O'Bara deal first, a second round pick straight up for Red O'Bara, and then the Avs traded Parenteau and a 5th for Daniel Briere, who we all know about that.
You know, at the time we were like, "What the f? You're giving up? This is a money deal."
Yep.
You gave up a pick. You also gave up a guy that
the better player,
right? Like by far the better player. You're talking about a guy that had been really productive for you in the 2 years since signing in free agency. But you know, I think there was a little redemption there because he was out of the league within 3 years.
I think it ended up not being as bad as it could be, but by the end of that first season, the disaster that was Briere in Colorado.
Right, but the big thing was that it was about freeing up that salary because it was identical money.
I hear you, but yeah, by the end of the year, you would rather take in like a pick instead of Briere.
Yeah, for sure. It could have been.
And then obviously, on the Barra side of things, you essentially turned a second round pick into Rocco Grimaldi.
which again, like, should have ended up being a decent deal, right?
Yep.
Rocco Grimaldi's turned himself into a fine NHL player in Nashville.
Not with Colorado, right?
That's one where I wonder, what did Jared Bednar miss? Because Bednar obviously didn't want to play him, but every time we watched him play, it was like, yeah, he's not very good defensively, but this guy drives play. Like, he just finds a way on offense. And that's you want to talk about, like, the kind of a low-key miss that we just don't really ever talk about for the Avs, and it's how they handled Grimaldi.
Yeah.
Unless there was just a major personality issue that I don't know about, and I will tell you, I suspect there was. Just there are connections that I could draw, but it would be me theorizing.
Sure. Nothing solid.
Which is why I'm not going to get into it, but they missed on that. I think Gregor brings up a good point with the original Tanguay trade. That one, I think, looks the way that it does because of what happened to Leopold when he got to Colorado.
Yep.
Where, like, Jordan Leopold was a really good puck-moving defenseman early in his career. A lot of promise. And then he got to Colorado, and he just couldn't stay healthy. And that was really it. Like, the guy just could not stay healthy. And you look at the rest of his NHL career, and it's the same thing. The guy had like a 10-year career, and he probably only played 70% of the games that he could have. Maybe not even that, because he was constantly hurt. We called him Leo Prone back in the day because he was never available.
And the interesting thing about Tanguay is he eventually made his way back to the Avs in what was a good trade for the Avs, where they dumped David Jones and his contract and Shane O'Brien to Calgary to get Tanguay and Corey Sarich. And Tanguay was the one who was in the league the longest of everyone.
The crazy part was Corey Sarich was looked at as washed up when they got him.
Yeah.
And he had a really underrated year, his 1 year in Colorado.
Yeah, they got a serviceable year out of him.
And then he got hurt. Low key think his injury was one of the big things that happened that year that put the kibosh on them in the postseason.
Yeah.
I think they missed him a lot against Minnesota. And then he got into that awful accident and he could never
played again. So
that was and then Tanguay. That his last Colorado stint sure was interesting.
He had that one, the first full year he played back he was great, and then
and then age caught up to him.
Yeah, he forgot that he had to stay on side, and that was that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's in the modern era, there really is just that chain of bad trades when Patrick Roy was president as well.
Yeah,
not quite to the same degree, but the Talbot and Carey for Jordan Caron trade is in that era as well. And
that one hurts because the Talbot, you remember that was their Kyle Quincy kind of like Ryan Smith turned into Kyle Quincy, and the other guy whose name escapes me, who was also a decent NHL defender and then just disappeared.
Yep.
And was never good again anywhere else. And then Quincy got traded in that 3-way deal.
Yeah, back to
where Detroit. With Tampa Bay and Detroit, where
and the Avs got Downey out of it.
Yeah, they got Steve Downey, and then they turned Downey into Talbot, and then Talbot into Caron. And
it was a downgrade all the way.
Exactly. And then they ended up the 6th round pick they got in that deal, they ended up giving back to Boston for Carl Soderberg, so it went back up again.
Yeah, true.
Like, that trade tree ended up with a good finish, but it just got worse at every step for the Avs. With Ryan Smith, the Quincy was like, okay, Like he's a decent top 4 D guy, and then he was miserable with the Avs, and he said all that stuff about guys having their bags packed or whatever. and then they for Downey, and then everybody hated Steve Downey because he was crazy.
Yep.
And then Downey for Talbot. Talbot was a great glue guy, but they just didn't need to make that deal. They weren't good enough to make that deal where it was like Max Talbot was Matt Calvert before Matt Calvert, but they just they needed Mikko Rantanen before Max Talbot.
Right. Yeah.
They needed good players before they needed role players, and it didn't work out. And then the Talbot, they moved on from him and whatever, right? But it was like that whole train was just a disaster.
Should we?
They just kept getting worse.
Should we cap this off with the fakest trade of all time?
Sure.
Jerome Iginla for a 4th
on a deadline where everybody knows that you're selling, that you're open for business, and I remember
that honestly,
deal.
That might be the greatest sin is the trades that they failed to make that year.
Yeah, I remember that guy that's on Reddit that absolutely hates my guts. That was when he started to hate me, at least openly. Because I wrote the thing. I wrote the article after that trade deadline that Sakic was asleep at the wheel. That that
when you have the worst team in modern history and you couldn't make a single move, really.
You have 2 months to try and find takers for these guys, and you couldn't come up. Your best deal ended up being Martinson for Andrew Ghetto, which had an asterisk because Andrew Ghetto was on waivers twice that season.
Yep.
You could have had that guy for free.
Yep.
And they ended up having to, they got him, which was all good and well, but got him for Martinson, who was one of their better Euro finds.
Yeah, and Martinson's still a guy that is bounced around, plays a couple of NHL games every other year.
Yep. Every time I think he was a really nice guy. I really liked him a lot, and I always wish him well.
So
he hit like a train, dude.
I believe that. I still remember his double hit on a couple guys behind the net, but it was interesting that a guy like that size, and he hit through people. He hit like a guy who was built 40 pounds heavier and 4 inches taller. Yeah.
But yeah, that was a disaster of a deadline. You should have been. I mean, you look, and if you go back and you look at every other team that tries to sell at the deadline, they do it. They find a way. And that's one where, we talk about how Sakic sets his price and doesn't move off it and is like,
that works in a buyer's market, but in a seller's one.
But when it came time for him to sell pieces off, you know what? You look at how Ottawa has done this, right? How is it that they had 10 top 100 picks to play with? How is it that if you go and you look at them next year, they're already set up with 1 billion more picks?
Yep.
They're ready to go.
Yeah.
And what they did is they committed to it, and they found takers, and they just kept selling good players off for pieces.
Yep.
And individually, you would look at the deals. You're looking at Mike Hoffman, and you're like, a second and a fourth or whatever they gave up, to when they flipped him to San Jose,
particularly funny.
San Jose flipped him to Florida 10 minutes later for something better, and you're like, Ottawa's a joke. But they still got those picks.
Yep.
They still got something that they could make out of it, right? And that was the thing with the Avs. They got nothing out of that year.
Yep.
The night before the trade deadline, Aaron Portzline said Fedor Tutin had been dealt.
And then it didn't get done.
And then nothing happened.
Yep.
Because the Avs just couldn't, for whatever reason, they could not close anything at that deadline. The only thing they got done was
Andrew Ghetto for Martinson, Iginla for nothing.
Yeah, the
And
fake pick.
yeah, and then a couple of minor league deals, and that was it.
It was easily like the big failure.
Yep.
Of their tenure. Also, we'd be remiss if we just didn't at least mention Eric Jelena deal fell apart pretty bad.
The third round pick for the Jelena never came together.
Yeah, and that was, again, like, that's a really tough one because Patrick Waugh loved him and had a specific idea on how to use him.
Yeah.
And Jared Bednar had none of that.
And Jelena broke his arm under Patrick Waugh, and then Waugh bounced, and then Jelena just did not fit.
Yeah, and then had attitude issues elsewhere.
Yep.
You know? And look, he hadn't played in the NHL since. So that's just really poor valuation by them.
And that's kind of the way the cookie crumbles there. I mean, it just goes to show that sometimes you can't win for losing, where even if you don't make a trade, sometimes that's the wrong answer. But honestly, the Avs have had some bad trades, but outside of maybe moving Chris Drury, they've never, and even Chris Drury's not like a Hall of Famer or anything. They've never given up a true superstar level talent and not gotten value out of it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you could look at it and say maybe their biggest for the Avs, maybe their biggest is the O'Reilly deal.
Yep.
In terms of caliber of player that they gave up.
Yep.
And
even that, it's like, well, they did okay on it.
Yeah, they did okay.
Yeah. So
it's nice not to be on the wrong end of one of the all-time boners.
So on that note, I think we're going to wrap up our Free Skate Friday for y'all. Thank you, as always, for hanging out, consuming the podcast however you may. If you're sticking around, we have the Denver Sports Podcast coming up in about 20 minutes here that I will be on. So if you want to check that out, would highly recommend it. But other than that, AJ and I will be back with you guys on Monday. So have a good rest of your weekend.